How is it going, everyone? Let's talk a little bit about interviewing techniques. How do you retain a job? We talked about that a little bit in response to some of the information I posted. Um, but part of, getting the interview is being successful at it. If you bomb your interview, the majority of the time you're not going to get the role, right? How do you connect with the person asking the questions? What should you answer in relation to talking a lot or talking a little? Should it flow well? Should you rehearse? We're going to try to go over that in this brief talk. And what I hope that you get out of this, and I hope you get out of the course, is a better flow of communication in a potential interview that you might have in the future. What would the interviewee say about you as you exited? What kind of questions did you ask? Did you make people feel comfortable? Those are a lot of things that come up in interviews as you're making a decision whether or not to hire someone. So we talked about what things went great in your interview. I can give an example of when I interviewed great. It was natural. I didn't have too much of a script. People didn't think I was faking what my answers were. I gave real life examples, and people laughed. It was fun. It was a good time. Some bad interviews I've had, they've been a little too fragmented. I've been too nervous. I'm not given good examples, and people often felt that I was there just to check the box, and that's not a good thing. So some things to consider in your interview, and I really like this list. So make sure you have a nice outfit. Dress for success, they say. Don't show up in lounge pants and a regular t-shirt. You want to make sure that you're dressed for success. Make sure you have your hair cut, have long hair, to the extent that it looks kind of draggy in regards to, the way you should look as an individual. Some people, of course, have longer hair than others. That's totally fine. I'm not saying don't have long hair. I'm just saying make sure you look, kind of your best, I would say, for the interview. Make sure you have your best smile. You come at it in a positive way. And I would say in regards to, how you look for an interview, go with your style, go what makes you unique, and go with the fact that, you own this and you did your best to look the best you could for that interview because they knew that you really wanted it, kind of thing. Some things to consider. I've had a numerous amounts of interviews, probably hundreds, where people have shown up late. So if you show up late for an interview, the majority of the time, you're not going to get the role. There's maybe a couple of times in history that someone has showed up late and got the role. I think some movie examples are spurring in my mind right now. But the majority of the time, you got to show up on time. Do research, please, before your interview. Know about the company you're applying for. If you walk in for an interview with my company and I ask you what the company's values are and you have no clue, then I'm going to have a red flag. So those are just a couple of notes to think about as you interview. Take a deep breath. Don't worry. Try to relax, of course, but prepare. Make sure that you prepare for the interview to the point of, you want to make sure that you have notes and you want to be ready to go per se. So don't worry too terribly much about exactly what you say in the moment. Make sure you've prepped for the interview and you have a script in your head. I wouldn't read from a script, of course, but some of the things that I did beforehand was I would stand in a mirror and talk about certain objectives related to my role that I was interviewing for, what past experience I had, and what helped. And another thing I would do weeks before the interview, I would write down my script numerous times in a notebook and use that as kind of a tool. So when I was in the interview, of course, I didn't have the notebook in front of me, but I could remember exactly what I wrote based on where it was on the page. You want to have a list of questions in your interview in relation to the job. So usually the interviewee will go through introductions and then they'll go into the questions. Most of the time these are standard questions. If they're a large organization, you usually have to do that for legal reasons because you don't want to give indifferent questions to different people and have one person have more of a chance to obtain the role than someone else based on the questions that you asked. So they'll go through a list of questions the majority of the time. And after those questions, usually 30 minutes to an hour, they'll say, do you have any questions? I would say 99% of the time people ask that. So you want to make sure that you have questions for that segment, at least 3, no more than 3. 3 can be, right at the verge of too much. Don't spend too much time in relation to your questions. Don't have too much detail, but ask questions as it relates to a few things. Here's my examples of good questions in the end of an interview. You want to make sure you ask a question about the culture of the group that you're working with. How do people work together? Do people enjoy their job? Is it a place that feels like home in regards to, is it a family camaraderie on a professional level, right? Another question that you want to ask is something directly related to the role. So if you're interviewing for a clinical position, you want to ask what opportunities there are to continue to learn in that role. So how do I grow in my skills? That's a good question to ask. And the third question I would ask is really simple. For the leader, the core leader of that role, the manager, what do you look in a potential employee? So what do you look in this role that you want? What are you hiring for that you want? And if you ask that question, you're going to hopefully get a proud response for the person doing the interview, because they'll be able to tell you exactly what they're looking for. It would be nice if you could ask that before the interview question so you could relate what you were going to say back to the answer, but usually that's at the end of the session. So, make sure, of course, you don't ask about the money. A lot of people ask about the money when they walk in. How much does this make? Don't ask that. It's a red flag. It makes people think that you're only there to make money. Of course, we get a job to make money, right? We don't get a job just to have fun the majority of the time. Most of the time, it's to provide an income and a living for ourselves. But don't ask that. It's not a good thing to ask. You should kind of know what the range is before you walk in there. I want to say really quickly, based on the past slide, make sure you speak clearly. At times people have trouble with communicating. Make sure you pronunciate right and you speak clearly to the best of your ability, right? Okay. So after the interview, make sure you thank the person for their time. If there are multiple people, thank them. In a non-COVID world, right? Shake their hand, tell them thank you very much. I'm looking for kind of next step in regards to the opportunity, and usually they'll say the recruiter will call you or will reach out to you in the future with with an answer in relation to you if you move on to the next step, or if you obtain the role. People send a thank you card, of course, after their interview. I think this is a good thing if you can. Just don't overburden people. I've run into a personal situation where I've emailed someone based on where are we at in the process, because it's taken a few months, and I regret doing that personally because it makes you look desperate, and you don't want to look desperate in your search. You want the people that are hiring to know that you're a good fit for that role, right? Alrighty. Here's some examples of a good interview. A good interviewer, right? So this is what a good interviewer asks. So watch this video, and a good interviewee answers a certain way. Same thing with this video right here. So those are 2 examples. And we're going to jump to a new segment in the course content section. So if you give me a minute, we'll hop there. How do you find a job? A lot of people ask me that. Where do you find jobs? Well, finding a job in a good economy, of course, I don't want to say it's not that difficult, but it's a lot easier than it used to be. So there are tons of websites out there. I just listed one here, USA Jobs. It's government-shaped jobs, right? So if you go on to USA Jobs and apply, you're applying to a government role. If you go on Indeed and apply, that's another avenue of ways to find a job. So there's going to be tons of jobs that come up there. If I'm looking for a job personally, I'm going on to Indeed and a different, maybe a couple of different websites. Glassdoor is another one, and those are all copyrighted. Of course, I do not own them. Those are their own threshold. But you go on there and look at roles, and you apply to roles that way. But the main thing that you want to have ready to go before that is a good resume. And if you build a resume correctly, then you're going to get looked at in response to an opportunity. So I would ask that in relation to the opportunity that you're seeking, you really look at building your resume to that fact. So if I'm looking for an opportunity to be in a service field like maybe a car mechanic. I want to put all relevant experience related to being a mechanic in my resume that I've done. If I don't have any relevant experience, I would want to apply, of course, to a starter role, right? Something that that would work for a new hire. However, if I do have experience, I want to make sure I list that out. I don't want to list my experience of being a teacher in relation to obtaining a car mechanic role. There's not a lot of comparables there. So when you apply to a job, be sure to exclude the things that the employer wouldn't want to see, or the employer don't have to know. So if you went to school in the past for a certain thing, I think you can list it out there as education, but don't go into a lot of detail about your past life as a nurse if you're applying for a culinary job. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now you can go over that in your interview. That's fine. Like talk about it as a past example of ways to improve, or what you did in relation to growth of your personal life, because there's usually a question in relation to that, but don't put it in your resume. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, that's pretty much it. So make sure you read through the course content segment. I'm going to add a lot in here that you can look at and find cool information for, and things that might help you in the long run. But the main thing is, do your best, take your time, prepare as best as you can. They say if you have an hour interview, prepare for at least 10 hours. So it's 10 times the amount of your interview. So, do the best you can. And if you want it bad enough, usually people will work hard enough to get it. So if you don't want it, then don't apply. That's what I would say. So make sure that you work hard to obtain the role you're seeking, and kind of never relent on your dreams. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks for all your work so far, and I appreciate your effort in this course.